Oh. All right, and here we are. So that wasn't the smoothest of intros. We popped in there for a minute. How is everyone? Thank you for joining us, and back with another chat tonight. We have Mike from Stellium7, and Mike did a couple of videos last year, was it? Unveiling a Titan, which is where I sort of first heard of you and saw your work, and yeah, it's sort of where I sort of started considering the whole Titan thing as maybe something that could be real, because we've all come across the mountains of people and animals and all this kind of stuff. So that's pretty much what we're going to get into. And of course, we did an epic, what was it, last week? 4 hours, I think we did on a live stream that
I still haven't recovered. They start streaming at 12 o'clock my time, PM or AM. So
wow,
I think
you were
almost went till sunrise.
That was epic. It was, my brain's still rattling. It was a biology lesson and a geology lesson, but interesting stuff. Yeah. So thank you for everyone joining us in chat. We'll have a chat first and go through some stuff, and then we'll see if there's any questions. So excuse me. I guess we'll just jump straight into it, Mike. So when did you first get onto the whole, we'll just call them Titans, the whole Titans kind of trail?
It's been about 4 years, and the Unveiling a Titan series, I started the first video, I think it's 3.5 years ago or something. So yeah, a little longer than you were thinking. It was a whole bunch of different things that kind of came together that got me looking at the mountain here. I live in Spain. I'm a chiropractor here in Spain, and got introduced to a whole bunch of different ideas kind of around the same time period, looking into star forts. I saw a video of Combe Gibney and some things that Andreas Exertus was doing back early on with a group that were calling themselves the recent Tartarians, that were talking about a lot of the stuff that everyone's, just really interested in now and is really exploding. They were talking about on pretty deep level back then. And so I had seen videos by Roger from Mud Fossils University, another channel called Flat Earth Nation, a guy named Alan, who was looking at what he was calling nephorensics. So Roger was calling it mud fossils, and Alan was calling it nephorensics, because he saw it, so much of the geology that we see around us, these stones that we're looking at as having origins, biblical origins, and that they're like the pieces of the fallen Nephilim. So that's why it's nephorensics. So he was looking at a lot of different stuff, and Roger as well, and they were kind of at odds about cosmological paradigms, because Roger is a flat Earth hater, and will ban anyone who talks about it, and he sees them as having ruined his life's work, which I think is silly.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because Roger was the one where I first came across the dragon. Is it the dragon in Africa?
Right.
And of course, I saw that, and that was I was just like, oh well, this is just silly. This is way too big. The only way I thought that could even be plausible was if it wasn't a ball. Yeah, more land, right?
Yeah, more land. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, if it's 900 miles long and we live on a 24,900 mile circumference ball, 24 body lengths and you're back to where you started, and so he's been asked that question a number of times, like, how does this work on, because he's a ball earther, he's got his theories about the cosmos and light, and he's made lots of videos on those, and honestly, I haven't gone very deep into them because it doesn't doesn't resonate with me. But
Mm.
I thought the mud fossil thing was interesting. And initially, when he started talking about the Titan in the desert, I'm just like, oh my God. And if it wasn't for a video that I saw of J Dreamers, where it was called Petrified Titans, and he was looking at Roger's work, and he was also doing some, cross-cultural comparisons when it came to mythology, and showing that, hey, there's a lot of stories around the world that have to do with these, not just giants, people that are 15 or 20 feet tall or something like that, but these titanic beings, and it's not, it's in some of the religious texts. There's probably more to it, and so Roger had a plausible theory for how things could petrify quickly. He was calling it mud fossil theory, the idea that when flesh of different types is encased in mud, that it's an anaerobic environment, and that means that there's no air. And so with no air, then you don't have the larvae and the bacteria and the different things that would normally be consuming and decomposing the flesh are not there, because they can't thrive in an airless environment. So then what happens is you get this exchange between the mineral content that's in the silt and the mud that's surrounding whatever it is, and then whatever it is on the inside, the gases and the water works its way out. And that's what they tell us is petrification anyway in mainstream geology. They just say that it happens over millions and millions of years. It's called paramineralization. So when they show us, when you see petrified trees, for example, they're telling you that's how it happened, but the conditions were right, and it took hundreds of millions of years. And so I've seen Roger's stuff hundreds of millions and millions of years ago. It's always these numbers that you can't
even hang up a stuffed rabbit, and it'll be petrified in 6 months.
Yeah. So I'd gone deep into the whole cosmology, Earth shape question, because one of my best friends is conspiracy music guru, and
nice.
before he started making the truth music, we were hanging out, and we were comparing notes and talking about all the different.
There seems to be a lot of you guys in Spain. It seems to be the place to be. Gee, I don't know.
It's pretty good here in many respects, but it can also get a little freaky when it comes to the totalitarian vibe and the totalitarian tiptoe that became a sprint. So it wasn't fun during that period, because you had mass compliance, and it was instantaneous. Like, there was never any question that they would question. So
scary.
Tough times. So he was the one who initially got me looking into Earth shape, because I already suspected that the moon missions and whatnot were pretty faked, and there was a lot of evidence in support of that. And so when he started talking about Earth shape, though, I was just like, no way, this is the most ridiculous thing I can think of, And so I brushed it off, and I didn't give it the time of day. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, he hit me with the question again. I'm like, oh, he went there again. I've got to, now I've got to go down this road to debunking him. And I thought, okay, that'll take 5 minutes or 10 at most. I'll find a live stream from the ISS or some photos from a satellite, and piece of cake, And about 3 months later, I had a very different, very different opinion. And he put me on to some very good information early on, because he was already following Globebusters, and then when he started to put out music, each video that he put out, they were premiering. So I was taking in all kinds of information, 4 or 5 years ago, that a lot of people are just getting onto now when it comes to magnetism, Ken Wheeler's work, the Primer fields, and looking into sonoluminescence and cymatics, and just all of these different, it was a total reawakening for me, because there were so many things that I just closed my mind off to as possibilities early on, because of the paradigm that we've all been raised in. And so as I started to question more and more of that, it was just like every thread I pulled on, it just caused things to unravel. And I'd already seen that. I'm as a chiropractor studying abroad and getting involved in student politics, and later on chiropractic politics on some levels. I already saw, like, there's there's dividing factions and dirty tricks in every single one of the professions. I was already well aware of how completely co-opted our lives have been by big pharma, and that was long before 2020 rolled along. So it's kind of frustrating watching that all happen in slow motion, you know, and seeing it for what it is, and watching everyone else just be, you know, totally afraid of whatever their TV has told them to be afraid of. So, yeah, kind of went off on a tangent there, but yeah, so that was all happening around the same time I started looking at geology with different eyes, because of these different channels that I'd seen. And this town that I live in Spain has a famous mountain that is called Montgo, and it's also known as the elephant because it looks so much like an elephant especially from one side, but actually from several angles. And that was one of the things, like watching Roger's videos, I'm like, okay, there's no boots on the ground work. There's no scientific method involved here. This is a guy soaring around on Google Earth, just looking at things and drawing conclusions. But he had a lot of interesting stuff to say. And my ears really perked up when I found out that Plato had written about this great battle between the Leviathan and the Behemoth and described it as having taken place in that portion of the world. You know, and you have all this stuff of like the Straits of Gibraltar breaking open, and you know, I've seen your interviews with Archaics. He's talking about you know, the entire Mediterranean was once a very well populated place before the Straits of Gibraltar broke open and let the Atlantic in. So clearly there's a lot of stuff that happens when you look on Google Earth at you know, Northern Africa, especially. You see just like mud flood and just stretches across the whole northern continent out into the Atlantic. So, and then you got the eye of the Sahara there. I can't remember the Ricat structure or whatever. That's pretty fascinating. Is that a former Atlantis, or is it an eye of a great being? Or, you know, there's a lot of mystery even when you're looking on Google Earth. But when you're just looking above down, you're only getting 2 dimensions. And this is one of the problems I have with all the people who are really excited about the whole Titan subject, is there's so many pictures going around of these profiles of mountain ranges, and then they turn them on their side and they turn them upright. And so you can see there's a face there. But the assumption of a lot of these people is that every one of those was a titanic being. And it's like, you might see that thing from a different angle or a different time of day when the shadows are different, and it might not look anything like that. You know, that's pareidolia. That's where you see something, you know, and you recognize a pattern. I can see it in knots of wood. I can see it in clouds. I can see it in all kinds of things. So I'm well aware of this ability that we have of, you know, to trick ourselves. And so when I started looking at the mountain, the first thing I did, well, I can do it with you guys live. You know, the first thing I did was got on Google Earth and I started looking at it, because I'm like, well, what if, you know, is it possible? Because the thing about this mountain is not only is it shaped like a Titan, shaped like, you know, it looks a heck of a lot like an elephant. It may not be an elephant. It could be any one of a variety of different creatures. Personally, I've come to the conclusion that it's a vertebrate, certainly. And in my heart, it you know, it definitely feels like an elephant. You know, and the first video that I did on the subject was this thumbnail that it's got these photoshopped tusks on it. You know, it looks really campy. It's kind of cheesy because it's like, it's a silly idea, you know, but I wanted people to know early on when I made that first video that, yeah, this is about as crazy a thing as you can ponder, but there's actually more to this than just pareidolia and just me, you know, off on a flight of fancy. And it took me about 2 hours of exploration before already my mind was completely blown, and I'll show you why here.
Right, yeah. You got share, so, you should be able to share.
Let's see, wait a minute, share screen. Which one? That one. Let's see, are you guys, what are you seeing? Oh, there we go. Okay. So you see the mountain there?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, so that's Montgo. And can you see my cursor when I'm moving it around?
Yep.
Okay, so you can see here there's an eye, right? So, and it's not just from this angle. If I come around and I look at it from over this way, looking this way, this whole side, it looks very much like a head. There's a cutout between where the ear would meet the shoulder. You can see the faint remains of a rib line on both sides of the mountain. So already just looking at the thing, you've got this, it's already looking like, wow, if it's pareidolia, it's pretty complex pareidolia because it's not just one angle. So this is just to give this is Spain here. And we're out on this point. This is Ibiza, 90 miles off the coast, right? And we're right here where it sticks out. And I think this is Titan country. This is Montgo here, which we'll zoom in on a second. This is another mountain nearby called Cumbre del Sol. This is another potential candidate here. And it's interesting because right where the head appears to be of what may be another of these, there's a giant limestone quarry right here that you can see. So it's a pretty fascinating area, but I didn't realize that until after I'd already done a lot of exploring on this and I started to look around. But this is what I was saying from above, like you can kind of get the impression that there's some runoff, here that's like, okay, yeah, I suppose that kind of looks like ribs, but you got the same thing down here where the legs are. So, that's not so convincing. Here you can make out the shape of the head. This whole portion of the mountain right here has all collapsed. And that's there's a massive geological survey that was done where they talk about this area, and it's known as a synclinal. And a synclinal is basically where the layers, I'll show a picture later, but it's where the layers of strata have collapsed. And actually, I think you can see it here from this angle. A little better. So you can see it almost looks like a little mouth there, right? And this is like a curve. Well, this whole section here has collapsed. So if this is an eye, then the other eye has long been destroyed, as has the ear. But this side of the mountain is very well preserved, and that was really what captured my attention initially, because initially, like if you look here, notice how the eye is closed. This is fascinating. So if I zoom in, it opens up, right? It didn't used to do that. That's something that came after I made 4 videos on the subject. And the second video I made was just about the eye socket alone. And then the third video is about the ear, right? So if I'm zoomed in close, I can't get really the big picture and get an idea of what the whole mountain looks like. But the eye is still open and the ear is open. But if I just back up a little bit, it starts to close up right away. And all of this happened after I made the video. So that's just an interesting coincidence, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Of course.
So I had been up at this cave on half a dozen occasions before ever even getting on this silly idea. And I was always fascinated by how unusual the structures were, and I pondered and wondered how it could be that those could be forming just from water erosion. I'll show some other pictures here, because if you on Google Earth here, there's the thumbnail. This is all blurred out. This isn't really how it looks, because this is 3D rendering as if it was a building on Google Earth. And now it's blurred out, so you can't, like in the initial video that I did, I was zooming way out like this, and then I kind of slowly pulled in towards to film, so I could get all of these different, as if I had a big drone that could travel great distances, and then all of a sudden I couldn't do that anymore. So this was a picture that I saw that someone posted on a local Facebook page, and I saw it and I just cracked up, because there is actually right here is where it is. There's this indentation where it looks like a perfect spot for tusks, but people have asked me, like, are there any signs of the tusks? Because I've talked about them in the videos, but there's no remains of any ivory or anything like that. But having said that, not all elephants have tusks, and also, like I said before, it may not be an elephant. It may just be a vertebrate. It could be a pachyderm of some sort. But you can see how the headline slopes down, and there's this hump, and then there's this cut in here where the head meets the shoulder. How already there's a lot of coincidences, right? That was even before I went 3D. And when you start to go 3D with it, then that's when you can you can make out the remains of ribs. You've got the spinal line there. The ribs are on both sides. And then also you've got right in here, between where the legs would be, you've got this deep crevice of a canyon that I've got some footage. So there's like a split between the legs as well. So already, without even going up to the eye, already we're looking at a coincidence list of what, about 10?
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of how the whole thing began. And I'm just like, okay, easy, let's not just jump off the deep end with this, right? Let me just show this now, because this is.
Yeah, because then you took your
right.
your research a bit further, didn't you?
Yeah, that was when I'm like, okay, well, let's approach this, with the scientific method as much as possible, because I'm not going to start making videos about the dumbest thing, that you could possibly believe, and make a fool of myself in this small community. So it took a while before I even, I had all the research all the way through the 4th video before I made the 1st video, and I started talking to people about it. I went with Alex to what was it, to the conference in Denver in 2018. And I got to meet a lot of cool people and met Bob Nodell and his wife. And no, not Flattoberfest. This was FEIC, the 2018 one, where Alex went and performed. So this is the 2nd page of the coincidence list, right? It's gotten very long, and some of these are incredibly specific, as you'll see as we go through this. Where was I going with that? So going back to the list here. Sorry, just closed it.
So just for anyone who's watching, who's confused what's going on, basically the premise is a titan is a giant person or animal, and so Mike's theorizing that this is a massive fossilized, is that what we call it? Animal.
It could be humanoid, or it could be a creature of some sort. Some have theorized whale could be that as well. It's a whale. A whale's a mammal and has a skeleton. I said I believe it's a vertebrate before, because the eye socket, for example, on vertebrates is very similar, even though the head shapes can be very different. Here, I'll show you some pictures of what I mean about that. Going into just the overall anatomy here of what I was looking at initially, because these pictures really represent my initial foray into the subject. So I started looking at skulls. Obviously, this is human, but you can see the different colors here of where the bones meet, and these are called sutures. And those sutures are very specific, because even though the skull shape can change very dramatically, and eye socket remains more or less the same, and those meeting points are very similar across vertebrates. And like I said, I had been up at the cave multiple times, so I immediately got curious about what was in there. So you can see these lines. Like, for example, see this line here that jogs? That's between the frontal bone and the maxilla, and that is a very specific line in a very specific place, and you'll see more of that in a second. So this is an elephant from above, right? And this is what we've been looking at. Oops, turned it the wrong way. There we go. You just to compare. And there's a cutout here for the neck.
The head collapsed, yeah.
And then there's a cutout on the other side as well. And one portion of the head or of the mountain has collapsed. This is an elephant skeleton from the side. And this is where there's a big muscle that goes here. And this is actually the eye. So we're talking about this portion here when we're looking at the head. Right, we're talking about right there. And see this hole here? This is known as the infraorbital foramen. On humans, it's hello. My picture opening software is not working. You still there?
Yep.
Okay. Open sesame. Huh. That's weird. Okay. What do I do about that? There we go. Okay. So I can go back here. Yeah. So if you see this hole right here, on elephants, it's here. And if you think of the elephant as lying on its stomach, this is kind of a gruesome picture. Sorry, folks, but this helps. You know, if you see the elephant lying like this, here's another carcass. I think my computer's getting hot. Hold on, I need to put a fan on the.
Can you picture poor elephant?
Sorry. What I've wanted to stop on. You know, this is the viscera. If it were to lie on its stomach, all of this would squish in, right?
Yeah.
And if it's a carcass and it's deteriorating, this is if what the? Sorry, this is normally happening. Okay, yeah, this is a place I can't remember, Klamath or somewhere in North America. There's a whole bunch of elephant skeletons that are buried in mud. Just to give an idea visually. And so these are the muscles. This is the one I was talking about. That's that big indentation that you see right here. This whole area is that where that muscle would be.
Yeah.
And so just moving on here. So this is another sad picture because it's dead, but you get the idea as far as what I'm talking about with the position. And this is exactly what the mountain does, and it dips down and then it comes up again. And there's actually a big iron cross right there at where the upper back portion would be. The cutout for the neck, the ear is missing. And that's a fascinating thing, because this is one of the reasons I decided I've got to go up to the eye again, because the ear, look at this, there's a quarter moon shape here. And everywhere that the rock is broken away, it's exposing underneath is red. And this quarter moon shape is exactly what an ear attachment would look like, right? So they just kept stacking up these coincidences. So this is that infraorbital foramen. This is a bear skull. You can see how different the shape is, but there's that other suture line. And people have asked why, if it's a creature, why are there sedimentary layers? And that puzzled me for a long time. Not enough to make me just give up the whole idea, because I couldn't explain why there would be layering. But it turns out that that's how bone grows as well. So if we're looking top down, and these are like topographical lines, right? So if you looked at this from the side, how would it look? A straight line, right? Or slightly curved, straightish line. So this is just kind of how it all began. And then when I went up to the eye, we'll come back to that. When I went up to the eye, here's another view. So this is elephant. This is the breathing passage, and this is the other eye. So if you were to think of what portion of the skull would be the weakest, it would be right there where there's this massive space, and this is where the whole mountain has collapsed. So a lot of people have said, well, where's the other eye? You know, here's that infraorbital foramen, and if you look here, how specific is that? There's actually a cave that goes right through there. So I'll show you a picture of it looking through. I used it in the 5th thumbnail. So you can see in this picture also, you can get a sense of just how biological all of this looks. And this goes through, and there's actually a second portion of the cave, because right where you see this light, that whole section has broken away from right in there. You see a breakaway, and then the cave continues through to here, exactly as it would if you know, if you're looking at the anatomy of a skull.
You can see the big dip where the nostril basically would have been.
And that's where the collapse is. And I've got lots of close-up footage here, and this gets into the fourth video, which has to do with the histology of the mountain. Again, I studied chiropractic, so I was really looking at this in depth from an anatomical perspective. Now, people don't realize this, but take a look at this elephant skull, and now compare it to this one. If you can, you can't, because it's not working. What is going on with my picture software? This never happens.
We must be, that happens to be all the time. It just means we're on the right topic.
What the heck? This is not a streaming issue. This is in my software of Windows. Come on. Well, let me try closing it. Usually I have zero delay with this stuff, and it's not even opening. Well, we can, while I mess around with this, I'll just click closing it.
All right. So, when I was watching your series, I think it was, you said number 3, and I was like, oh, yeah, I don't know, what about this guy's on? Is he crazy? But then you sent a drone up into the ear, and I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you're mixing two things up, but
I'm mixing two things. It's
So the first, we'll give my CPU a chance to calm down, and maybe I can open pictures again. So basically, what happened is I decided, instead of just like, oh, it's an elephant, look at all these things I found, and posting pictures online, and I decided, okay, I'm not gonna jump off the deep end. I'm gonna pull out my anatomy books, and they're over there. And started looking at all this stuff in depth, and like, okay, if this were an eye socket, which it appears to be on a macro level, looking at it from a variety of different angles, and having been inside it and thinking about just how odd the geology is in there, I would expect to find certain features. Like, what would I expect to find? Suture lines, where like the frontal bone meets the maxilla. There should be one. There should be an optic fissure where the eye nerve goes back. There should be blood vessel fissures. They're literally like, you can have a suture where the bones meet and then they follow each other, or you can have an opening in the bones, which can be a hole, which is a foramen, or it can be like a slit, which is a fissure. And so there's an optic fissure, but then there's also other fissures that go down at a particular angle and lead to the sinuses. And so that was the thing that was just like, already when I was sitting here just looking at the books, and I was thinking about what I had seen and I'd been in. And that was before I knew there was a deeper portion of the cave. A friend of mine told me about it, and I went, what? And he said that there's this little portion of it's a huge cave. You can't on Google Earth, you can't really get it's like, it's 50 meters across, probably. Wow. Maybe not that long, maybe 30 or 40. Let me go back to sharing, see if anything is working here. Share 2. So you can even make out a little bit. Can you see this again, the cursor? Yep. You can even make out that this kind of goes down. And this portion here, which you can't see well because this is Google Earth, but I'll show you pictures of it. This looks like a rising, cresting wave. It's literally kind of reaching up in a curve. And if you're down here, you see it looming over you. And I theorized early on that was maybe the remains of an eyeball. And then these cracks here go down at that exact angle that I was talking about, that goes into the sinuses. And then I heard about this extra little cave that I didn't know anything about, and my friend took me there, and I've got footage of that in the second video. Let me just show. Okay, maybe it'll work now for me. Let's see if I can open pictures.
Oh,
it's kind of a pretty basic function.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Yes, thank you, GG Star, for your super sticker.
Ooh. All right, so here we go. Come on, right. You can do it. It's
And of
just a
course, all
picture.
these titans and these things, like you mentioned at the start, there's so many stories about them. They're in the Bible. All the ancient stories talk about them. And of course, there's lots of stories, but Jason talks a lot about the from archaics, the vapor canopy, and everything under the
Yes.
vapor canopy was much, much bigger. And when that collapsed, it caused the Great Flood. And if everything
Hmm.
was like bigger, like Titanic, and then suddenly they got flooded, stuck in mud and covered in water, mineral-rich water, then that's a way that this may have happened.
Well, okay, this one appears to work, so I'll just try this. So this gives you a real, sorry, yeah, I've been listening to your interviews with Archaics. I probably churned through about 100 hours of his content now.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to talk to him about the whole vapor canopy, and I was in a
You
live
should.
stream with him, or where he was live streaming, and I asked him if the Phoenix event, or what Jay Dreamers would call the plasma apocalypse, could be responsible for petrification, which, there's so many different examples of petrification that I can give you. I mean, I've got pictures of very, very detailed petrified brains that are like, it's fully brain on the outside and crystalline inside. And that ties into a whole other aspect of the work that we haven't even talked about, that after I started digging into the mountain in depth, I just started looking at all the rocks around me differently, because I'm like, well, if this isn't what they tell us it is, what is it really? And there's so many times I've seen rocks and I'm just looking at it going, wow, that looks like a piece of meat, or that looks like a this, or that, and that's, what was interesting about Mud Fossil University with Roger, is that I was seeing him talk about these things, but very often he was like 100% certain that it was a this, and I'm looking at the rock and I'm going, yeah, maybe, or maybe it's just a rock, it wasn't so clearly defined. And I was frustrated by that. But he had his DNA analyses, which he waves in every video. And so I thought, okay, these, and I opened them up, and he's got PDFs on his website. So I looked through them, and I don't have a background in chemistry, so I can't really read the results of that stuff and make any sense of the findings. But I've talked to a number of PhDs about the work that I've done, and a couple of them are on board. I've talked to medical doctors. I've talked to a lot of different people who are professionals who've looked at the research, and they're totally on board with the findings. So anyway, I started looking at the stones differently, and that was when I started to notice another pattern emerging in smaller stones, which really became as big of a discovery, if not bigger, than the mountain. I mean, the mountain has far-reaching consequences for our understanding of the realm. David Weiss called it, he said it was more disruptive than flat Earth, and there's some funny things that he said about the research that I've done. Actually, I just posted, it's just a 3-minute video that I posted. Maybe I was thinking I could play that while I try and get let's just see if the pictures are working here.
All right.
I'm all over the place now. Any questions while I'm distracted?
Yeah. Is that another super sticker? Thank you, Dragonfly. Yeah. So this is another thing that I saw. Like you said, with Roger, he sort of shows all these rocks, and he's like, "This is a heart. This is a brain." I'm like, really?
With absolute
That's
unimpeachable certainty. Yes.
And he used to show the quartz layers and that, and it's like, this is a fat layer, and it's like, well, yeah, it kind of does look like that, but it could just be quartz. But then you went a bit deeper into it with especially with the hearts, didn't you? Like what are called we're calling heart stones.
Yes.
And of course, my question that I asked you last week was how do organs fall out of bodies?
Right. Yeah. And this is a question I get asked all the time about, like, was there some kind of a worldwide ritual that resulted in the removal of these? And I abandoned that idea very, very early on, because it became it's just obvious. And if it were the case, you would expect there to be portions of the body still connected and remaining. So why would the organs just like pop out of the body? And so that was a real confusion for me. because the way this whole thing began is I went out into the river bottom just looking at tons of rocks, because I wanted to find an example of a mud fossil that was just clear as day. And I was frustrated by the lack of clarity. It was like, if this is true, and it is true that, so much of the stone that we see is, has biological in origin. I'm not talking about the 300 million year timeline, where they talk about sedimentary layers compressing dead creatures and then turning them into different kinds of stone in these just nice, neat layers. And then they age, they document the age of that stuff based on strata and based on different questionable techniques that are often, debated, hotly debated as they're being introduced. And then later you just like sweep aside all the debate and say, no, this is effective. But, even things like carbon dating are known to be effective in the thousands of years. And the further you go with it, the less accurate it becomes. So I went out and just in the first day after really putting it out there that I would like to find something, I looked down and I found this rock in the river bottom. And it might not mean much to people who don't know the anatomy, but when I saw this, and I immediately was taken by the fact that it's got a fleshy color, but it's surrounded in white. And everywhere the white is removed, it's red underneath. And that's how the heart is. We have the pericardium, which is a fatty sac, and then inside of that is the heart muscle. Yeah. And then the next thing I noticed was this, which is known as the isthmus, which is where the valves open to let the blood into the different chambers. There's these muscles that are called papillary muscles that have cords that connect to the valves and open the valves like this as the heart is doing its thing, and there's a space between the pulmonary arteries that's known as the isthmus, and it's right there. And then there's bumps inside that you can see, and I believe those to be the remains of the papillary muscles. So that's already just in the space in the river bottom. Looking at this in 2 minutes, there was already like a list of coincidences for this one stone. Now, if you think of this as the atrium and this is the ventricle, there's the 4 chambers of the heart. Everything's backwards here, so I'm pointing at the wrong things. I gotta get my head straightened out. There we go. That hole is right where the coronary artery would be. And then along this line is what's known as the coronary sulcus. So if you look at the atrium and the ventricle, there's a fatty portion that sits right there on the sulcus line where the coronary sulcus is. So already how many coincidences is that, right? You've got the pericardium, and then you have this overall heart shape, which I'll talk about more in a moment. But look at this. Above and behind, so if you've got one side above and behind this is the aorta and the vena cava openings. So I was just blown away by this. I filmed a video of me just rotating the rock, and then I sent it to Roger, and I was like, this is amazing. This is better than anything I'd ever seen him show, right? And I thought, you're going to love this. And he just ignored it. He didn't. And I sent him messages. He didn't respond, and we've had lots of messages. He's since blocked me. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's a long history there. And I've thought about making videos about it, but I just don't want to dive into, negative and,
exactly. It's low energy, and it's not worth it.
But, it's just so frustrating because my work confirms his in spades, and he hasn't acknowledged any of it. And I don't know if that's because he's just afraid of, someone stealing his thunder. He likes being the master of his own mud fossil ship. I had problems with mud fossil theory. Now we come back to your main question, which is important because I'm not trying to evade it. This idea of the organs popping out of the body made no sense. And so right off the bat, I was like, well, somehow the external portion of the body is being destroyed while the petrified organ is happening. And so in order to test the theory, because I found this rock and I had already accumulated in the space of a couple days looking at it and comparing it to anatomy, I had about a list of 15 different coincidences on the coincidence list. So let me just pull that one up.
Thank you, Morgan, for your kind donations.
And that is there and there.
So yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, I mean, I'm like most people. I was seeing this stuff and going, "Oh," but I'm not a biologist. But when you
Right.
start pointing out all the actual biological, pointers in there, it's becomes a different different story, doesn't it?
Well, this is something I was thinking of talking about also today is like when I did my master's thesis in chiropractic college, I picked a ridiculously hard subject and sweat blood for about a year over that thing, and it was on chiropractic manipulation technique and its effects on autonomic disease, which you want to make your life complex. That's the good way to do it, and it was all in Swedish. So this was a master's thesis. It took a year to write. We had 7 pages of footnotes, and every single footnote was from a published study that we had read, not a Google link or something that we found. So and that's just such a long, convoluted process to do that. And I forgot why I was talking about that now.
Biology, but especially with hearts as well. I mean, yeah, my mind got blown last week when I found out that the heart is actually a tube that's been basically wrapped up, and it's got a half twist in it. Yeah. And then it seems that the fatty sac around it is to hold it in that configuration, in that shape, right?
Yeah. And that's, so let me just get that question out of the way real quick before I forget to answer it. So my answer to that changed over time. And now I've basically, I'm calling it boiled egg theory, for lack of a better term. Yeah. The idea being that because the heart is in with the pericardium, which is this fatty sac, and this is so much better if I have visuals. So let me once again try and get this
up there. Sorry. Oh, there we go.
All right. Am I sharing or are you sharing?
No, you're sharing. That's you.
I'm sharing. Good. Okay. So
yep, there we go.
If just to finish a point I was making before about this. So I went out into the field, and I've done this live. It's not just me cherry picking. I've gone out live, and in the space of 15 minutes, I've gathered a dozen of these things. And I started to recognize that there was a reoccurring, very, very specific pattern that was happening in the stones. It was happening across all sizes, and it was in the larger stones. They often exhibit these same features. And when you start to add up all of the different features, you start to get a very long list of coincidences, and that's what I'm showing here. You see that?
Yeah.
So this isn't in any kind of specific order. These are just the things that I found as I found them. But basically, the general idea is that the heart takes on a harp shape, right? And it can be any one of many different kinds of shapes, because it can be like larger, like a I'm in the stone hearts here. Let me get to the fleshy hearts.
Like basically, they're from all different animals, so we can be looking at an elephant heart to a mouse heart kind of thing.
Exactly, right. So if you look at an elephant heart and you compare that to a giraffe's heart, for example, or the other organs, I get that question all the time. Are the other organs there? Yes, they are, but they're not as distinct. Like here's a liver. This is a lobe line, so I theorize that it's going to cleave along these lines, because these are actually 2 separate pieces. So then you end up with a rock that looks like this, and maybe it's got some kind of an indentation in the back, but there's not a whole lot there to go on, just morphologically, to make any kind of a claim about what it is or isn't. Whereas hearts have very, very specific anatomy, because they've got, take a look at this. This is a decellularized heart. They've removed all the blood, and you can see that it's just bone white when the blood is gone. But there's very specific anatomical features like these lines here. This is called the septum. It's also known as the interventricular sulcus as well. And hearts, there's different kinds of blood, so there can be different colors. We have all kinds of different creatures, from little mice and birds all the way up to gigantic mammals and whales. Like a whale's heart is the size of a of a
The
car,
VW, isn't it? The VW
right?
Beetle, yeah.
Yeah, and this is the process of decellularization. So whatever the cataclysm is, it removes blood from most of these, because a lot of these stones, and I've got a bunch of them here picked out, which I'll show in a moment. A lot of these stones are bone white, and you break them open and they're still bone white. But others that are pink, when you break them open, a lot of times they'll show that they've got chambers, or they've got blood vessels remaining. And this is what it looks like on the inside, but there's going to be compression. So you don't have these big openings. You've got basically a block of stone that's exhibiting indentations or openings on the side, little chambers. This is a close-up of what I was showing you before of, the isthmus and the papillary muscle. And I went inside this in the first video I made on the subject, which is called Mud Fossils, the Heart of the Matter, Part 1. And I went in with an endoscopic camera, which is what they use for like colonoscopies, and looked at the inner chambers of the heart. And it got even more specific once I got inside. There were another few items that are on the list. And I was just going to show the thumbnail to that video, because if people take the Petrified Titans and Organs playlist on my channel in order, they can see the evolution of the discovery of these things and the process that I went through as I was trying to come to terms with it. This was the first. Come on.
And of course, the link to Mike's channel, Stellium7, is in the description below, guys. So do go across, check out his work, give him a like, a subscribe, all that good stuff.
So that's the first one there. And then in the second video, I went back into the field and I pulled out a bunch of these live. Now, that wasn't my best selection, ever. The Petrified Organs video was when I really first started to recognize that there were these reoccurring themes that went way beyond random chance. They were far too specific. And I realized that I was actually documenting a phenomenon here that wasn't recognized by mainstream geology. And, this one here, there's your isthmus again, there's your openings to the chamber. And then on the back side of this flattened portion, there's the aortal opening as well. And then there's another feature called which you can see right here, this little line here, that's called the interventricular sulcus. And that gets back to your question about the heart and how it fits together, which we'll come back to. So then I went out into the field and I broke a bunch of them open because I wanted to see what they looked like inside. I didn't have any saws or any ways of doing a clean cut, but I started to crack them open. And the end of this video, I show the best at the end. And there's some that are just truly, well, I'll just pull it up if it works, if anything works.
Has anyone ever scanned one? I mean, I guess we're talking big dollars there, but.
Yeah, well, so I went out and spent 400 of my own money to have them CAT scanned, for the 4 with the chambers and with the openings, and it came back that there were some, but I already knew that there were some chambers inside because I could see them with the naked eye. So the heart muscle was way too dense. Sorry, not the muscle, but as it converts into stone, it's too dense to get a proper picture. To really, yeah. But I was contacted by an MD in your neck of the woods, actually, and he was very interested in what I had done. And I sent him the CAT scan. He's not willing to go on camera or recording for personal reasons. when it comes to the last couple of years, he's not interested in getting on board with something that's this controversial. But let's see. Before people get bored, I was going to show the Broken Hearts Tell Tales. There we go.
All right. So this is what's inside the rocks.
Yeah. So you can see here, I've found found one there, and you see that it's white on the outside there. That's the remains, I believe, of the papillary muscle, and I found this in several stones. And then I break it open, and gotta find it. I speed this up, and there we go. And you can see the remains
Yeah,
of chambers inside. So there was a whole lot of stuff that was stacking up with that, and we could talk for hours just about that one subject with regards to the stones. So then going back to your question about oh wait, I just want to show one last one here.
And so is that quartz? Is that like what we call quartz?
Yeah. And in what I've taken to calling biogeology, because I don't think mud fossil theory explains it. And when I get back to the boiled egg theory, I'll explain why. But mud fossil theory requires that something be encased in mud. And then how would that thing petrify and then be found completely separate from the body that it was in? It makes no sense.
Exactly.
And it took me, just because I didn't have an answer to that question, didn't mean that I was going to throw out the empirical evidence. It's not that I'm like holding on desperately to my wacky theory. It's that the empirical evidence was what was leading me and guiding me in this exploration. So you can see how bloody this is, and there's a quartz quality as well. So my theory is that that anything that's fat related, fat in the body, ligament, tendon, nerve, disc, that when these things petrify, they petrify to different forms of quartz. And the color changes depending, like if it's blood, how much of the plasma is present or how much of the red blood cells are present. If it's something like a tendon, it would depend on the makeup of the tissues. Then I was contacted by somebody who's about to be on your show, from what I understand. So before he contacted me, I did this video, some hardstone fuel work, and I went out live just to show people, look, this isn't rehearsed. I'm not cherry picking. I haven't gone through hundreds of thousands of stones to just find these ones that look just like, like I want them to look, so I can convince you of my wacky theory, right? That would be cherry picking. It would be dishonest. This is me going out live and finding them, and you can see the results of that. And then I reached out to, let me show that one. I did a little channel update because I was really excited one day, getting back to you. How many threads do we have? Go ahead. I'll pause for a moment.
No, you're right. I was just going to say there's so many of them out there. I mean, it looks, well, what are your thoughts? To me, it's looking like this is definitely a post-reset event, like one of the big resets, like, the flood or something like that.
I think there's been multiple. I think there's antediluvian, which is going to be your pre-flood, and our mythology talk about the Titans. And who defeated the Titans? Was it not the giants that defeated them? So I think we had like a time where there was an avatar tree realm, these massive trees that make our current sequoias look like moss. And there's a lot of, I think, compelling evidence for that. Everyone's in debate about the tree stumps and whether they're volcanic or whether that's formerly mining waste or, it's potentially, a tree stump, perhaps. Roger thinks Devil's Tower is an Achilles tendon, which I don't buy that one. Where's the rest of the body and the foot? Yeah, right. But when it comes to the trees, you've got the whole No Forest on Flat Earth, that Sylvia Ivanova was really influential in getting out there, but it's some other person that did the video. And then a lot of people started, taking pictures of all these different tree stumps and comparing them to mesas around the world. And it's very compelling footage, but it could also be slag heaps that have just, formed that way. Yeah. And it looks like tree root erosion as well. I recognize that. The cinder cones of a lot of the mountains look totally like mining waste. So if you've got this fractal level of reality where you got giants and then you got bigger giants and then you've got titans, then, the people who built, what everyone's calling Tartaria and all this megalithic architecture that's all over the world and all the star forts and everything, my take on it is, what were they mining? I think they were mining the titans, that they literally terraformed the whole realm. And you had earth, you had probably some kind of native stone that existed, and the titans were living and thriving off of that. The trees were there. Those were destroyed in,
And it says in the Bible that they were cut down by the Nephilim.
Yeah, and the book of Enoch talks about actual size. It describes them as 3,000 ells, which is roughly a mile tall. So the
Wow.
Book of Enoch is describing these great battles and actually giving sizes. Well, that's the size of Mont Go. Now, how does that fit in with, Roger's 900-mile long dragon? Well, I toyed when I was looking at Google Earth, I toyed with looking at Africa, and I'm like, wait a minute, Africa's the same shape of all these stones I'm finding. What if Africa's, we talk about the heart of Africa. What if Africa's a big heart, and that there's an actual superstructure that is a greater creature? And I just saw this map last night for the first time of an eyeball. But that's Mud Flood was Armageddon, formerly Flat Earth Nation. Alan, he's been talking about us living inside of an eyeball for a long time. So I'm more in alignment with, it's a toroid, we're on some kind of an accretion disk, but maybe it's an eyeball. At this point, anything, I'm not attached to some all-encompassing model. I'm just looking at what's there and trying to analyze it using the scientific method to the best of my ability, and looking at actual empirical evidence and doing boots on the ground work and trying to see how what I'm seeing empirically is correlating with, one, the theory, but two, the anatomical evidence, and looking at what do we know about histology, which is the study of tissues and how tissues form. I'll just let you go for a little while I look for something.
Yeah, we've got to let ourselves be open to all this stuff. We know that, if anything, what we've learned over the last couple of years is we've been lied to. So to put a gate there, oh no, we're only being lied to this much. That's just ridiculous, isn't it? So like you say, everything's open, everything's on the board. We've just got to make sure, it's like we've been talking about, if we see a mountain that looks like an elephant, we don't run out and go, it's an elephant. We do our due diligence and then go, okay, wow, there is something here. And then we bring it out. And this
is the biggest problem I have with the Titan research community is they're not doing research. They're just looking at pictures. And I've been at this now for 4 years, right? The first Unveiling a Titan video came out 4 years ago. It's a 6-part series. The first part is just an introduction. Most people stop there. They're like, this idea is crazy. That was just meant as an introduction. I don't present the evidence in that video. And everyone's hand wave dismissing it. This is the stupidest thing without actually seeing any of the evidence. And like I showed before, 56 coincidences, are not coincidences. That's a lot of very specific, and I haven't even shown them. Here we go. I just want to show, since we were on the Heartstone thing, let me show.
It's just interesting, the whole, people run around yelling cognitive dissonance and yelling at people. What do you believe everything you're told, do you? And then you present a new idea to them, and they do the same.
And they're quick to mock. As soon as they get any kind of a pet theory, they think everything is their theory. And it's like the more I look into all of this, the more it just feels like, it's like the old standardized, multiple choice testing. If you just pick E all the time, you're probably going to be past the test, right? Because most of the time it's like all of the above or none of the above, right? Exactly. So let's see if I got this one.
Hang on, I'll put it on. Yep, you're up there.
Can you see that? Okay, so so this is hi. That was me. So I got excited because this doctor who you mentioned before that made the discovery about the heart, which I'll introduce people to in a minute.
Oh wow! Okay.
All right. So this is me looking like a total madman. But all right. So can you see here? Just looking at them in overall, you have a very very specific heart shape. You've got often, if I look at this from the other side, you'll see that many of these have indentations or cracks or openings at the top where the blood vessels would be. At the bottom, if you look at the very bottom of these stones, they have a twist in them that looks like a propeller. That is a very specific anatomical feature, because as the heart goes into contraction, which it does on death, it twists, and we'll show a video example of that in a moment. But you can see that it's the exact same thing appearing across sides. So you get the harp shape, you get a tapering in on the sides. Sorry for the people who are on your mobile phones. This is probably hard to see, but make it a little bigger that way. But this is way too many specificities for just random chance or water erosion and things bumping around and wearing away at each other. Some of these have blood vessels remaining in them. That's a fractal pattern. It's not just a line that some sea creature, carved through, or some kind of water erosion. It's actually shaped like a tree. I can show some examples of that later, perhaps. But this is a very, very repeatable phenomenon. Now we're looking at them upside down. Here's a half of a brain. Now this is really interesting, right? So here's the one I showed you before. There's your isthmus. This is an isthmus. This is an isthmus. Here, at the top of this one, there's an aortal opening. Same with this one. Same with this one. Same with another that I have that's 1.5 feet large. And then right here, this one is broken off. You can see that it's cleaved right here. And there's this opening. There's a space there that is where the ventricle would have been. So, how many coincidences have to add up before you start to see an emerging pattern that goes beyond pareidolia? Mm. And as an answer to that question, I got a comment not long ago, which I can read here, from somebody who's a statistician. And he wrote me and he said, I find it interesting that I myself have no interest in geology per se, but am a statistics major. You by far mounted enough evidence that qualifies your find to be that of more than coincidence. Statistically speaking, the amount of similarities are impossible odds.
There you go.
Some of these are.
When the I can't remember when the truth is. Oh God, I'll stuff it up. I can't remember. But Sherlock Holmes says something, and it was really clever. So if anyone remembers, put it in the chat.
So there's me just showing these different reoccurring features. So so that the reason I set these all up this day is because a guy who was the son of this great cardiologist that you mentioned was actually coming to my office. Oops, I closed that one. Let me. I'll just talk. So he came to my office. So basically what happened is, as I started looking into this whole thing, I had all these different heartstones that I was finding, and they had these reoccurring patterns where it was like harp shape, flattened top, indentations or openings there, also on the side where the pulmonary arteries would be. They'll have these lines in them. Right, you can see one faint there. Whoop, I got my hands going the opposite direction, and then there it's very pronounced, right? So this rock for me, I found not so long ago. This represents what I call proof of concept, right? Because it's predictive as well. Like if I show you this rock based on what I've just shown you, you have a guess about what the rest of the rock is going to look like, right? Yeah. And if I show you the backside, you're going to realize that my guess was right? Now, if I turn it around, I show you, well, you can see that it's clearly broken there. And if you look inside, it's looking very meaty, even though the outside was white, right? So that's proof of concept because I actually had a prediction about this rock before I saw the rest of it, right? Same thing happened with this one because you can see the mud there. See the line of the mud? So I found this one face down, and I say face down, I'll explain that in a second. But it was buried to mud up to that point. Well, I saw this and I said, there's the pattern again. There's your sulcus line, which I'll show in a minute why that line is there, because it's one of the most prominent features in the heart. And then there's indentations up here. So I saw this face down buried in the mud, and I made a prediction about what the rest of the rock was going to look like. I said it's going to probably be faceted. It's going to have 3 faces that are going down in opposite directions, which relates to the pattern that I've documented in a bunch of videos, and sure enough, there it was. You have one face going down this way, one going down that way, and one going up this way. You have the flattening. So that, on the Wilkerson scale that I was showing before, that's an 8 or a 9 or something. There's a lot of coincidences that don't make sense. Another thing that they have, and this is the most specific of the things that I've found so far, apart from the blood vessels themselves and the chambers, which are pretty rare, and I think that's to do with compression. My hand's shaking. See that? See how it's like twisted like a propeller? That's a very specific thing, and that's something I can show over and over and over again in all different sizes.
Yeah.
Right.
So and that's the half twist, is it?
That's not the half twist. We'll get to
not?
that in a minute. That is the twisting of the heart as it's contracting. And you know, rigor mortis, when we die.
Oh, okay.
Our heart goes into contraction, just like all of the other blood vessels in the body. So here's another, and you can see your suture line.
Yeah.
Right. And then you'll see there's the front will be curved or faceted, and the back will typically be flat, and oftentimes it will bend in. And this is an exaggerated version of that, but you can see that's a very specific feature, right? There's your indentation and discoloration at the top for the blood vessels, the curving in on the bottom. And then if you look at it from the bottom, there's that propeller shape again, right? So these are extremely specific kinds of finds. And the more of them you find, especially in a specific rock, right? Here's another. There's your twist again. There's your curved underside. So here's the thing. We're taught that these are just broken chunks of larger structures that have smoothed out in river bottoms. And the way they were formed is that there was compression for hundreds of millions of years that led to somewhere between you've got your sedimentary layering, then you've got your metamorphic rock. And the more pressure you have, the more heat and pressure, the more it starts to begin to melt, right? We got all the melted building guys and everything, you know, and that's a metamorphic rock. And then it becomes igneous rock, which is your volcanic, which is pushed up again by the volcanoes.
Yeah.
And so that's what they're saying. Dead creatures, ocean floor, pressure, more dead creatures, layering, and then eventually stone. And then tectonic activity breaks those those layers upward, creating our mountains, which then break off into ever smaller pieces. And as they're working their way down the hills, they're going to erode and they're going to bump against each other. Well, that is bullshit. And I can tell you 100% in this area that there's two kinds of bone. I mean, there's two kinds of stone here. There's Titan and there's petrified organ, and there's basically nothing else, because if you go up the mountains, you have all of this broken material, but it doesn't look anything like any of these rocks. It's not on its way to becoming smooth. It works its way down the canyons, and when it gets to the bottoms of the canyons, it's still broken, fragmented rock that has no pattern in it whatsoever. And it's not magically going to jump into a river, roll around with its friends, and then develop all of these indentations, and these doesn't happen. So these other rocks are already there. Where did they come from? They didn't come from the mountains. They're not breakdown of the mountains, right? So they're probably coming from the mud flood, volcanic, whatever, killing all the creatures. And then so this gets back to the other question of why the organs. So my answer to that, I'll just read something that was written.
Of course, just one point would be, if it was a cataclysm, there'd be no predators to run around and eat them all.
Okay. Am I sharing? No.
Sorry.
It says I'm screen sharing.
Yes, you are.
So I'm going to just read two messages that I got not long ago. One says cremation. The heart is the densest.
Are we supposed to see something? We haven't got that on the screen.
Sorry. I was going to show you.
I've got the mountain again. Yep.
Okay, this is a little gruesome for the squeamish. Let me just pull it up real quick. Hearts. I didn't really have a whole lot of time to prepare for this one because I
know
all day, and I got
for jumping in. I had
So and I'm also this weird thing where I'm not able to open images, which I've never had happen before. I need to figure out what's doing that. But so let me just go back to hearts. 1 second here.
So what have we got here?
Okay. So this is a collection of stones that I sent off to a laboratory in the United States after I started recognizing this pattern. And so you can see they've all got the harp shape. I actually made a video on my channel where I went in and I did just on video while talking about these particular stones. I did a this is the video here. exciting research day. Terrible icon or thumbnail, but anyway, so I dip him in water and I show these different features, and I was excited about sending him off to a laboratory in the States, and that became a whole saga, which we can either talk about another time or not. So I'm trying to get to the anatomy. There we go.
So do you think we have natural mountains at all? Like as far as what they tell us a mountain is?
I don't know about that. And it may be that what they're calling tectonic plates are ultimately titans floating in the deep seas. If you think about your lying on your back when you're in the sea or salt water, the saltier the content, the more buoyant you are. But even so, even if you're buoyant, you're still only a portion of your body is going to be sticking up above the water. So maybe that's what's happening on a continental scale.
We've started off massive, and we're just getting smaller, and living on the shoulders of titans.
Yeah, I'm sorry to.
Oh gosh,
this is really gruesome here, but this is known as the greater omentum. So here's your heart and your lungs, and then they're wrapped inside of this thick fatty sac, and then the intestines are as well, right? So these are two different chambers. Heart being up here, and this is what a heart looks like when it's really soft. You can see how malleable it is. So if you have contraction, which is rigor mortis, that's going to give the spiral contraction, and then any pressure is going to cause a closing of these. And I think that's why so many of the ones that I find are creases, and also the atriums. That's this floppy section here. I think these are burning away in the cataclysm. And just to answer the question, my theory, I call it boiled egg theory, because the basic idea is that whatever destroyed the creatures was completely cooking the outer portion of the body. And so if you put an egg in water and you start to boil it for any length of time, then you're going to get a hardening of the egg, right? You're going to get this.
Exactly.
The wrong.
And you mentioned last week as well that there's a phenomenon of hearts that they've found when after cremations and things, and they find that the heart doesn't burn. That's the only bit that's left.
That's what I was just going to read to you, and I'll read that now that I've got that picture on the screen. Do you have that picture on the screen now?
Yep.
It's gruesome,
nice.
But so the lungs have been removed from here, right? Nice and meaty. So I said the heart is the densest muscle. That's why it's so prolific. Even with the cremated body, the only thing that isn't ash is the heart, and that was new to me until recently. And another guy sent me this message this is a guy named Derek, and he writes, "Petrified dog heart." He says, "You're onto something here. A few months ago, I cremated my Rhodesian Ridgeback on a funeral pyre that was 5 foot tall, 8 foot long, 4 foot wide, of solid seasoned oak. This wood is known for its great burning properties. When all was said and done, the only thing left that did not turn completely to ash was her heart. It was completely blackened and burnt, but still obviously a heart. Skull gone, hip bones gone, completely into ash, unrecognizable from anything else. The body's ashes are quite obvious against the wood, as I used 100% seasoned hand-split oak and made a perfect burning fire. The heart lasted through all the wood and was sitting on top of the ash after very light rain the next morning. It burned for 36 hours and was so hot that you could not get to within 25 feet.
Wow.
Okay, so this gets back to the boiled egg theory. So imagine a heat that was much, much greater due to some worldwide cataclysm. What's that going to do to the outer portions of the body? Well, the boiled egg theory goes in hand in hand with bone broth. So I could call it bone broth theory, because why am I not finding the bones? Why I'm not finding skulls and brains? There are examples of brains, but they're very rare, and I think that's primarily because they vitrify. I talked about fat becoming crystal. Well, if the heat is hot enough, that crystal then melts and it becomes fluid. So, you know, there's a lot that actually lines up with the theory, and I didn't know about this as I was trying to discover what's going on. But again, here's that fatty portion. I believe that all of this is getting burned away. So if you think of a pressure cooker, if you put bone inside of a pressure cooker, you cook it for 2 to 3 hours and it turns to sponge, right? You can get a T-bone in there, and people do this to make bone broth. They cook it down, and you know, the more they cook it, the softer it gets. Well, that's true of bone, but when you think of an egg and you think of the calcium shell in an egg, well, here's your pericardium. Of all the organs in the body, the heart has the thickest sac surrounding it, which is the pericardium. And sometimes that sac is remarkable. You know, you can see all kinds of different manifestations of that when the picture software functions, which it's not.
Oh gosh, again.
Am I allowed to use profanity here? This is, what the heck? There we go. Okay, so it can be extremely thick, right? And all of this, I believe, is just eaten away. There's compression, and you can see how there's a curve here to the heart, just like I'm finding in the stones. And then there's this line again.
Yeah.
So so there's a guy named Francisco Torrent Guasp. This is a picture of him here. He's a Spanish cardiologist, and he spent years puzzling over the idea that the heart could possibly, with its little pump, push blood out to the 60,000 miles that's estimated of blood vessels, right? And this is especially true because blood is very viscous, very viscous. In fact, it's more viscous than ferrofluid. And if you look at ferrofluid, it's great for visualizing, you know, the magnetic toroid, right? Anybody who's gone into Ken Wheeler's work has visualized this. And if you look at blood vessels, they have a very blood vessels and specifically red blood cells. They have a very interesting shape, don't they?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so I believe they're being propelled, you know, dielectrically or electromagnetically, whatever you want to terminology you want to use, through the blood vessels of the body. I don't believe they're being pushed, and neither did Francisco Torrent Guasp. And that was what he puzzled over, because if you think about it from a plumbing perspective, it makes absolutely no sense that with this little pumping motion, the blood is going to go out to trillions of cells, and then it's just going to passively return to the heart in order to be pumped out again. Right.
Yeah, and also like the pressure, like as it goes out, the veins are in capillaries are in ever decreasing sizes, so it's got to pump more and more and more. Yeah.
So you have a viscous fluid that's going into ever narrowing pipes. So anyone who's studied plumbing, I'm sure if Paul Cook looked into this with his plumbing background, he'd be like, yeah, that makes no sense at all. So he puzzled over this, and so did a lot of people for centuries. There were, you know, the prevailing model is still taught in schools that it is a 4-chamber pump. This is one heart, and this is an elephant heart. See the differences in shape? Now think about those turning to stone and then getting some erosion and wear, right? You're gonna get a lot of different shapes of different kinds of rocks. This is a giraffe heart. This is pig or human, I can't remember which, and in fact they've used pig hearts in human transplants, right? And some people probably think there's not much of a difference between them. But so here you can see how floppy the atriums are. This is why I think in the cataclysm, this is being burned away, and why the harp shape, which is surprisingly the most distinct and easiest to spot, is actually the most common. So it's actually easiest to spot the ones that are least likely. Does that make sense? Like this harp shape is, you know, think of all the different kinds of harps that we have, and then all the different hearts. Sorry, I took that away so quick. You know, so this is where we're getting into the, you know, this list of all of these different features. The more things that I find in a rock that's on this list, and the list for that first one I showed is up to 25. And that's because I've done the endoscopic camera work. I found stuff inside the heart as well. And this is without, I did a CAT scan of this stone, and I you know, I haven't done cross sections. I did that later in another video because a lot of people were asking me, well, why don't you slice some open? And so I did that in this video here. Tighten. Come on.
All right. And
Thumbnails.
370 people watching us. So thank you all for being here.
Hi, everybody.
Show.
If you've ever seen my videos before, you know I can go on and on and on. So
yeah, definitely check out Unveiling with Titan on
right.
Mike's channel.
So this is one I did that's just showing a whole bunch of stones that a friend of mine, Howard Stirrup, gathered because he got excited about this topic, and he's got a whole massive collection of his own. So I showed that in that video, and then, like I said, I went out in the field with this one and found a whole bunch of them live. This is just before the son of this cardiologist. Come on. I close it. It's like some of them don't want to work, and some of them do. It's weird. And let's see here. Where is it? This is a video that I made showing what I'm going to show you now: helical hearts, petrified organs, and synchronicities. And
Really cool.
This video is really worth viewing because it'll change your whole perception about everything you know about a whole lot of different things.
Exactly.
Our understanding of water, our understanding of blood and blood flow, and most of all, our understanding of the physical nature of the heart, which is way, way beyond anything we could have possibly dreamed of. And Francisco Torrent Guas, this cardiologist, is the one that he proved this undoubtedly, and you'll see why in a moment.
So this blew my mind. So when you're watching this, guys, just remember that we're taught something our whole lives, and we're told that it's information that's come from experts who have spent all this time researching, and they're giving us the truth. And
all the scientists are in agreement about.
Yeah, so it's in all the books. It's taught in the universities, the schools. You're not allowed to question it, or you're a freak. But when you see this video that we're about to show, this will change your brain. Like it just will.
Yeah, my brain just went, what, when I saw this. So what he discovered was that the heart is what he describes as a helical band. And okay, so I gotta remember my photos aren't working here and go just for video, because video does seem to work. So let's stick with video, and I'll just skip through my videos. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We've got my channel videos. There we go. Helical hearts right there. Okay.
All right.
Come on, baby. Yes.
All
right. So, yeah. So this is the man right there, Francisco Torrent Guas. And I'm talking about, the reason I made this video was not just to share his work because it was so mind-blowing, but I had so many synchronicities that were stacking up about these rocks, and I kept finding them in the most unusual moments at times when I had specific thoughts. So there's the sulcus line. You can see the little indentation at the top. Now, finding a rock like that might not be such a big deal, but it's happening in moments where it's like the only rock around, and I'm looking down in a moment that I have a particular thought in my mind, and that thought coincides with something where I'm, asking a question in my mind, and all of a sudden there's a rock that's like answering the question. Does that make sense? So that's where synchronicity ties into a whole lot of the work that I've presented. And this is especially true when it comes to this man's work. So I highly recommend this video about his life, the helical heart. He was truly a gift to humanity, and most people still don't know about him. Most cardiologists go through school and they just get a little bit of information maybe about this, and then they just move on. And most of cardiology still hasn't adapted itself to this knowledge, which is a crime. So this is what I was showing before, where the heart, see how it's twisting on contraction there?
Yep.
Right, look at that again. That's that twist at the bottom of the stones that I'm talking about. Yep. This portion here burns away. The heart shape, you have the openings are actually, this is separated, and then there's openings in there between this and this, right? And all of this is gone. And the reason it's gone, which I've started to say multiple times, the boiled egg theory, So the bones are gone, I believe, because they're just being annihilated. It goes down to bone broth, brains and skulls as well. Though there are some few examples of petrified brain, we're not taught that if this is true, that many stones have a top and a front. They have an orientation because they're not pieces of larger broken structures. They're actually petrified organs. And I believe that a great many of what we call the pebbles and the stones that you see in rivers and shorelines, that they're not that shape because they've been eroded by water. They've gathered there, and there has been some water erosion. And you can see what the water erosion looks like to these stones. I'll show you right now if it works. If I can get a picture to work, that would be nice. Live and come on tonight. Nope. Next. There we go. You can see. Yeah. So this picture. Wait, where is it?
I'm still looking at the heart.
Yeah. I'll just let this run while I'm looking for this other thing.
All right. So this is just showing us how the heart works.
Speed it up a little bit.
And this just blew my mind away, especially when you think there's people doing open heart surgery and they don't even know what the heart is. It's bizarre.
Yeah. And this literally changes everything we know about cardiac surgery. Well, so yeah. This is, you see the spiral in the fibers? Yeah. And the heart was known affectionately as the Gordian knot. And in mythology, the Gordian knot was supposedly sliced open by Alexander the Great, and the story was that whoever could solve the Gordian knot would then be the king of Macedonia, and he just took out his sword and sliced.
His sword and chopped it. I know, right?
Right.
He cheated.
Yeah, he cheated, but they're like, well, the knot doesn't exist anymore, so I guess that makes him king or something. But shoot, the rock picture that, come on. Yeah.
So what are we looking at there? Is that actually from,
this is the heart fibers, which
that is heart fibers, okay, actual heart fibers.
So
okay.
So if you, let me just show, it's easier.
So they put in a solution and got rid of everything else pretty much.
So yeah, that's exactly what he did. He boiled the hearts and then carefully removed the outer layer of fat with a scalpel. So he hasn't sliced into the heart muscle fibers at all. He's just removed the fat. This is a cross section of the heart and looking from above down. And you can already make out the spiral fibers, right?
Yeah.
And then this is him at the University of Salamanca in Spain. And he had these radical ideas. He said that it can't be a pump. There's no way it can be a pump because of this viscosity thing we were talking about before and the narrowing tubes. There's got to be some other thing that's I just got to show you right there. Remember all those lines I was talking about, the sulcus lines? You're going to see these again in a second. But I have so many examples of rocks with these. So you've got the harp shape, you've got indentations, you've got the curved underside, you've got the twisting bottom, and you've got the lines there. Tell me that isn't a lot of coincidences for a single rock. This guy he became one of the premier cardiac surgeons in the world because he discovered the works of Francisco Torrent Guasp, and he brought them into the mainstream consciousness and eventually started to create some surgical methods that were way more successful. He's probably saved a lot of lives because of that incorporation. And I know one cardiologist has reached out to me, and it's still hardly even taught in the school books.
Wow. So basically this is all based on the heart's not pumping the blood. It's pumping, but it's not pumping the blood around the body. Yeah.
So he theorized that there was some kind of a twisting helical action happening. And once he discovered the actual shape and that it was this what he calls the myocardial ventricular band, which is also known as the helical heart. And you're going to see him right here. There he's showing the sulcus line. And they go into a bit of an explanation about all the stuff that I've been describing. And here he's literally bluntly dissecting it with his fingers. He's not even using a scalpel. And he's literally pulling the heart apart. until he gets to this one point right there where he's got to use a scalpel to, I cut it out because there was a long explanation there. But at that point where he gets back to there, he uses his scalpel just to make a little cut, and then boom, he unravels the myocardial ventricular band. And then he rolls it back up.
Your heart is a tube.
Your heart is a tube.
It's a tube.
Right. And it's toroidal. It's toroidal in nature. So, I mean, when we think about, electromagnetism, and a lot of people have been looking at electricity and how dielectricity and magnetism, a lot of people have been pondering this picture a lot lately, right? You've got this spiraling in and spiraling out in both halves. And then the green line would be the dielectric inertial plane, also known as the accretion disk. And then you've got your point of singularity here. Well, guess what? This is exactly how our hearts function. It's toroidal, it's fractal in nature, just like our blood vessels. And, electromagnetic, these are just some different pictures that are looking at the mathematics. But, something akin to this is in your chest. And interestingly enough, what does it look like? It looks like a toroid, right? And it looks a lot like one of those red blood cells that I showed you before. So this ties into the whole as above, so below. You turn this thing on its side, there's your singularity right there, right? And you have this spiraling in and out of both sides, So if you rotated that 90 degrees, you would. So I'm not sure what these things are. This is not the one I was. Anthony Peratt, he's got all kinds of interesting theories that have to do with rapid petrification. There's a guy named Mungo Jupp who's done videos with Thunderbolts Project as well. Yep. Looking at things like fulgurites, these things that form when when lightning hits sand. This is an artificial fulgurite that's been created using high voltage.
Wow, coral.
This is looking at that the heart again, and there's a spiraling there, and then I think this is looking above. And so if we go back to that video and look at it.
So basically, the design of the heart is a spiral in and a spiral out. To create. It's an energy thing.
It's like a dual vortex going in opposite directions. And if you look at the works of Victor Schauberger, they tie in perfectly with all of this. So that's what I talk about in this video, is the connections between Schauberger, the works of Francisco Dorrant Guasp. I've seen nothing to show that Guasp knew anything about Schauberger's work, but it's basically teaching us the same things. Yeah,
we see it all the time though with these, intelligent researchers. They all come up with the same conclusions. The ones that don't go the mainstream route and stick to their guns, they all come up with the same conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. This is the cosmic model, right? And this reoccurs fractally across levels, which I would show a bunch of cool pictures right now, but I can't. So,
and of course that even ties back to the titans, to giants, to humans. It's like fractal, right? We're all sort of born from the blood, if you want, the bones of the predecessors. Yeah.
So here's how water is functioning, and this is exactly what our heart is doing in two directions. So
obviously as well, the heart also generates the the magnetic field, the aura, right? So that would make sense as well, that it is a vortex, an energy creating center.
Exactly. That's the picture that I was going to show you, was the
sorry, what?
No, it's fine, but I can't show it to you. Let's see if it opens now miraculously, since you've mentioned it as well. No luck.
I mean, I just find it
delayed reaction. There it is. That's what you were talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's all coming from the center, and it's all energy. I mean, this is what they teach us. They try and teach us everything's little, physical balls, and all these little things that everything's mechanical. But
if you think of that as Yeah, if you think of it as a cymatic utterance of the Godhead, which I've been calling it lately, each and every one of us is one of those, and then each and every cell, and it goes down, probably atoms as well, whatever those are. I would suspect they're probably toroids as well. There's a astrologer named Dane Rudyard who once described our physical reality as a hierarchical series of interpenetrating holes, spelled W-H-O-L-E. And that would make a lot of sense if you're thinking about all the different ways in which cells come together to form tissues and then to form organs, which an organ is a whole unto itself. It has its individual function, but it participates in the greater whole that's our body. And so that, and then it goes up to society, culture, world, all this fractal as above, so below stuff. There's our so here's Harry Potter fighting it out with Voldemort, and look at what they're showing there. This opposite,
the red, blue beam.
Yeah, your red shift and all that. So I think they're showing us all kinds of different, truths in plain sight.
They do show us everything. They do tell us if you're willing to look. But if you listen to what they're just putting in front of your face, that's all wrong. But if you're willing to look and really listen, they do tell us everything pretty much.
Am I still sharing?
You are still sharing.
So these are the sprites which have been captured on. Looks like a painting to me, but they've been captured on film and both photographic and video. These are your Lichtenberg figures. I think the Grand Canyon is a giant one of these. So whether that was some kind of gigantic mining operation from a fractal level up, or whether it was formed by the plasma phoenix event, I don't know, but the traces of it are all over our realm. And and then you've got the mythical component of that, which is this what they're trying to tell us with Cthulhu and Davy Jones and Medusa and all of these highly destructive beings in mythology, Kali the Destroyer, and then this ties into Melt, obviously. So, some things do look like melted buildings. I mean, this could be a slag heap that they carved into, but I don't think so. I really don't think they carved into that with Bronze Age tools.
Covered in slag or something and uncovered. But we just don't know.
Yeah. And maybe this is a softer material to this, and they're able to carefully remove it.
I mean, I've seen some pretty bizarre pictures. Paul Cook again has been showing a few of them of where it looks like they literally just go up and they just pour cement or some kind of slurry over the landscape. Just hardens. It's just bizarre.
Totally, the geopolymers. It's so obvious. There's a 2-part series by Observation Deck on geopolymers that's absolutely amazing. Everyone should see that because and the work that Paul Cook has been showing. This guy learned how to just copying a tornado, looking at this vortexing. He copied Schauberger's work. This is a little plastic thing at the bottom that's like a few inches long. And he starts moving millions of gallons of water with this little tiny device. It was a big problem for these tanks where they couldn't have stagnant fluids, having to keep rotating and moving the fluids throughout the liquids. So, vortexing technology is what they're using in our jets. It's how everything grows, as you're seeing here. And then, getting back to the heart. So this
charges everything too, doesn't it? It charges water when you vortex it.
So here what they did is they blew up a cow's heart. The charging, and the movement and breathing and all these things, the oxygenation of the blood by our respiration. And you can see I've got it sped up too much here, but if you look at this, going back a touch, as they blew up this heart and then shrank it down, they can expand it, and you can see the opposite rotating vortexes. So Francisco Guasp theorized that, and then once upon a time he saw that video, and he saw some other video where they're looking at positronic emission. So this is back to the myocardial band, and basically, so if you think of that tube, the electrical impulses are going from one end of this tube to the other, And then because of the nature of how that's rolled up, it gives us the 4 chambers, but it also gives us this dual rotating spiral, vortexing blood flow.
Yeah.
Totally far out stuff.
So it's probably more of like a blood cleaner than a pump. I mean,
Yes.
that's what you do with
and
water, right?
That's what we see with the work of Schauberger. So you're getting, it's a implosion technology, you could say, because it's centripetal force, and it's increasing until it gets to a point of probably, in sonoluminescence, it's cavitation, right? That's actually giving rise to these stars in the jar. But in us, it's creating this actual suction, and then the blood is literally shot and propelled through the bloodstream. And I think it's almost like some kind of a quantum locking that's happening because of the toroidal shape of the blood cells. And if you think about the blood vessel shape again, and that magnetic toroid shape, there's probably some kind of a, what do you call it? I said it already, this quantum locking. There's something happening with the 4th stage of water, which is structured water, and then you have the viscosity, and you have the iron that's in the red blood. It's going to take people smarter than I did to put all these puzzle bits together.
I mean, the fact that there's iron in it too, it could be magnetics in there as well, and
and this was the last thing. This was the final nail in the coffin that absolutely proved his theories. This is positronic emission, and this is double speed, but you can see even there that and you can see the twisting of the heart there as it's still pumping inside the body, and there's your twisting. So it's been confirmed a variety of different ways, but none of us are taught in our schools. I wasn't taught in chiropractic college. This was a big deal, and Francisco Guasp gave his last speech in Madrid after 25 years of trying to wake people up to this. People finally started to catch on to it, and he went to Madrid and he gave this this talk, and it was in front of a whole room filled with cardiologists. And then at the end of the speech, it was standing ovations, and he went back to his hotel room, content for having finally been recognized by his peers after decades, and died of a heart attack that night. That was kind of a tragic ending. And some suspect foul play and maybe the CIA heart gun or whatever. But
I mean, this is the thing, discoveries like this. I mean, that would cost big pharma billions.
Yeah, and so I theorize also when I saw him open up the heart. Yeah, I mean, think of how many. It's probably trillions at this point.
Trillions.
When you look at all the the heart pressure medication, the beta blockers, and all this stuff. And when he goes to fold this up, right here, there's a little half twist, and that's what a Mobius strip is. It's a flattened band with a half twist that meets at the ends. And so, what is a Mobius strip? That's what I start this video with. It's not coming up here. I don't want to skip because I'm going to show this, but the Mobius strip is basically a 3-dimensional one-sided object where you follow one side around and you end up right back where you came from. So there you see the lines, and you see the heart and the structure of the heart. So every single aspect of everything that I've talked about, and there's your suture line, there's your blood vessel opening. Every single aspect of heart anatomy and function and physiology that I've just shown you, I've found in the rocks, and I found it in spades. I literally have hundreds of examples.
Wow.
Yeah, and
amazing.
So it's kind of a brain splat moment when you start. I mean, look at this. Come on.
That's
random chance.
All of them. Yeah.
Erosion, bouncing around against other rocks in the. Look at what's wet. Bone white. Why is it bone white? Well, I've already shown that you can decellularize intense magnetism. This is another thing. Oh, this is incredibly specific. I can show you a bunch of them that have see how it's like a knife edge here?
Yeah,
curves
yeah.
in. It curves in
Oh,
here.
yeah.
So I
Yeah,
already
yeah.
showed you the bottom twist, and I talked about the front being faceted or curved, and the bottom being flat or inwardly curved. Well, what that results in is one side is fattened and the other side is thin. And I've got so many examples. I can go back to the screen here real quick. Where are you located? So I can see what I'm showing. Hey, everybody. So we go back to that one. Now that one's kind of flattened, but if you see a little thicker there,
Yeah.
not so much that one, but this one here, definitely thinner edge, fatter, the flattened bottom and the curved underside. This one, oh, I was going to tell that earlier. I went back because a lot of people asked about slicing them open, and I did that. So there's one of my most recent videos is called Slicing Heartstones, and I went out with Alex. I found I found 12 of these in a river bottom, and I went over to his house. He had a grinder saw, and we sliced through them. And then this was one of the best of the 12, so I'll just show you the best first. There's your line. There's your kind of fatter side. There's your curved underside. There's your little knife edge. And then at the top, you've got the opening of the creases of the remains of the blood vessels there. So that's a lot of them. That's just one of many. And then I didn't want to polish this side because look at that. See how where the top, so either a blood vessel going sideways. Let me show you what the blood vessels look like in the heart. If I can.
They tell us that's all done by worms or something, no doubt.
Let's see, share screen again. And come on, open. You can do it. I know you can. There we go. See that? See this one going across? Can you see the blood vessels? Oh, yes. Yeah, I didn't.
Sorry. Yep.
It says what blood vessels look like in the human heart. You see that?
I see. So you cut it,
So you see this fractal. So I find a bunch of rocks where like this whole network and structure of blood vessels and how it's fractal like a tree upside down. Yeah. I found this in the stones also. Many of the stones, I've shown that in the videos as well. So, and it's not like a creature went along and ate a groove in the rock, and then went off in another direction. It would have to go out, make smaller and smaller grooves, turn around, and then go this way, turn around and come back. And there's no way that's what's happening. So this is what I was showing you here. Go back to stop share.
Yep.
There we go. So there we go. So this one, I didn't polish this one, but you can see here it's where the saw blade broke it. But you can see at the top of where either one of the chambers or both of the chambers or a blood vessel going across would be. That's in alignment with my theory about heart stones being, that the fat is going to petrify to different forms of quartz. So if I wet this one. Do that without killing my keyboard. Hold on 1 second. I dry it off. You can see the reddish lines in here, and then here I believe is either the top of the chamber or one of the bigger blood vessels going across the central portion of the heart. And then I polish that one here.
It's a bit gross, isn't it? That means a lot of this marbly sort of rocks and stuff that we like is the insides of old animals.
Yeah, it's kind of gruesome when you start to think about it.
Yeah.
So here you can see the red.
Yeah, wow.
Right? And you can see the remains of the blood vessel there. And around the outer edges, you're seeing the blood. But when you get into these other ones, they're bone white. So I think the process itself, or it's really nice and pink, like some of the bigger, fatter ones that still have their color. Like this one, I haven't sliced open yet, but if you look at this one, see the blood vessels there at the top, right where they should be. There's the tapering in on the sides. There's the bottom there, right? That one, if I cut that one across, there's a good chance that I might find stuff in here. But I lose so much with the saw blade. I lose so much material. I'd like to get fine, like laser cut, and have wet like slices, so that I can compare going down to see if there's any anatomy showing itself. But
Yeah, that'd
right
be
now,
good.
you know, this for example, I showed before with the indentations. If I put this one in water, it just comes alive.
And all over
So
it.
it's
Vincent just
just
said gold veins, which we talk about veins all the time with ground. And do they talk about meat? Do they say marbling with
yes,
meat? They do,
yep.
don't they?
They use
Yeah.
marbling is a term that they use for the for hearts as well.
Yeah.
So I mean I could just go for 2 hours just showing you the examples over and over and over again. So anyone who says this is random chance, I say prove it. Go find a bunch of random rocks, film every step, and then put them into a tumbler and create these rocks. I challenge you. Not happening.
No.
You know, so I've shown that one several times now. But
I mean, if that was
here,
every rock on Earth would be round anyway, right? A perfect circle eventually.
what does that look
What's
like?
that? A brain, is it?
I think this is one hemisphere of a brain, and there's an
Wow.
indentation right here. So if this is the front
it's
of the brain and
corpus
this is the back,
callosum.
there's an indentation in our brains right where the cerebellum is.
Yeah.
And right where the two halves of the brain meet in the central portion is the corpus callosum. And that's where the greatest amount of blood flow in the body is. So what is the brain? Fat.
Wow. Fat.
And the blood flow is gonna be crystal.
Wow.
Right. So
I wonder if this is how they know, with mining, especially with Australia, it's such a massive place, but they always seem to find where the minerals are. Is that just because they know?
Roger was the first.
And they're literally, going to specific.
I see a comment over there. It says Roger Mud Fossil University was the first. He was the first to talk about mud fossils. He's never mentioned petrified organs. He's never mentioned my work a single time. He's never shown his face. He's just avoided the entire subject. You see how much information I'm presenting, how many correlations, how much repetition. We haven't even gone into the eye, the ear, the tissues of the mountain. The fifth video is about the eyeball, and there's all the fat of the insertions of the eyeball is all there. It's a 10-inch thick layer of crystalline matrix that covers the back of that cresting up wave. And in that crystalline layer of fat, which I believe it is, are all of these fractal channels going in just like blood vessels would. And there's even an optic nerve there. So that's the fifth video. And I show the before and afters of the sensorship. That's my new word. Sensorship of the people at Google Earth, which the critics will just tell you is
just a glitch
it's just a rendering error or something like that, or whatever. They can always find an excuse after the fact. Then
number 3, the ear one.
Number 3 is the ear. You asked me about that. That was where it got full-blown Twilight Zone.
Yeah, you got to watch that, guys.
I went up to the eye with my list, and in 2 hours, and I filmed it all and photographed it all, and then I brought it back and I showed with 3D anatomy, going into skulls with 3D anatomy rendering. I show the inside of the eye sockets. I show where these fissures are and where they all go, and I show how it would look like if it was an eye socket, and then I show what's there, and you can decide for yourself if I'm just like cherry picking and trying to make it look a certain way, or if it's like, just
no. I mean, you've done some great research in that series. That I went into it like, oh yeah, bloody Titans, oh yeah. But then when I hit number 3, I was like, oh okay, fair enough. So definitely go check out that work, guys, and share it around too, because the more people we can get out there, sort of fossicking and that, there's rock hunters everywhere. They just don't know what they're hunting, right? So the more sort of evidence
and people need to be really careful, because I started a Telegram channel, but so many people are just posting rocks. And it's fine if you want to post a picture of a rock and you're not drawing any conclusions, but if you're like, this is a such and such, there better be more than just like it looks like that from one angle, or you're going to come off looking like a crackpot, right? You're just like, oh, this is a toe, or this is the head of a creature. It's like, well, if it's a head of a creature, there's a lot of specificities about a head of a creature, right? And you should be able to find more than just like it's shaped like a head and there's a discoloration right where an eye would be. That's not very specific, right? So you
No,
gotta
I
gotta
like your
exercise
list.
discernment. And my whole approach to this has been, God, I'm so
Very scientific.
handicapped by not being able to show pictures. I wonder what that is. That's,
sorry. Am I put that up again for you?
no, you're not
No.
handicapping me. My system is.
Yeah.
So I started to talk about the Francisco Torrent Guasp thing. Let me just share the screen again. So close tabs? No, cancel. Definitely don't close the tabs.
There we go.
There's that one. And then, so this is where you gotta look at the odds of things. I've shown this list a bunch of times now.
Yeah, that list, yeah, that's great.
And that list is important because that can be a guideline. And people who aren't cardiologists and haven't studied a lot, they can go online and they can look at the anatomy of a bunch of different hearts, and they can look at the things that I've shown today, and they'll start to get a feel, at least for the basics. And then they won't, look so silly if they find some rocks. I've had lots of people from around the world that have shown me amazing, examples of these stones. And where is it? Helical hearts. And you see that video?
Yep.
Okay. So just skip through this. And I think, yeah, so I talked about the Mobius strip. So there's that half twist there.
There's a Mobius strip there.
Yeah. This is a triple strip.
So
this is the idea. So I've theorized that the heart is a Mobius strip, and that it's actually the blood is being propelled through this thing in this toroidal fashion, but it's happening electromagnetically, and maybe it's some kind of quantum locking, or maybe it's something to do with the dielectric plane. And so when you look at him unravel here, when he goes to fold it back up, he starts by making a half twist there, and then it rolls up into this knot. So there's the half twist.
So that's the Mobius twist.
Yep.
Which basically means you can have two currents or two opposite charges running on the strip at the same time, right?
Right.
On opposite sides.
Yeah, and so anyone who's gone into Ken Wheeler's work or the Primer fields, I highly recommend. PRIMER. Those 4 videos that guy did will just blow your mind.
From Ken, the Primer fields?
No. Primer fields is from another guy whose name I don't recall.
Okay, Primer fields.
Yeah. So, this is going back to these are those fissures I was talking about. These are in the eye. There's a little tunnel here I started to talk about. You got to crawl through on your stomach. And it's like 4 or 5 meters long, or on your butt. And then it opens up into a big channel, into a big cavern down here, which is, perfectly in alignment with the sinuses. The line here between the frontal and the maxilla is perfectly preserved, and I would show you that, but you just have to watch the videos to see it. This is where the sinuses go down. So it's either going back into near where the optic nerve is, or down into the sinuses. This is looking at the layering that I talked about before. This is a picture of Google Earth, but right in here, back in here, is the sinus stuff. And this is where the eye socket is, and these are the suture lines. And take a look. This is that cresting portion I was talking about. The whole backside of this structure is covered with a 10-inch thick layer of crystal. This cave is that cave that's in my 5th thumbnail for the 5th Unveiling a Titan. That's exactly in the right place for that. There's one portion of it, and there's looking out through a part of it, and there you can see how organic this is. The black, the black is going to be your venous blood that doesn't have the iron, which makes it red, and the red is going to be the iron-rich blood. And you can see that this doesn't look like something that just formed through some kind of erosion. Look at how far that little channel goes through. Pretty wild, huh?
It is, yeah.
What are the odds?
It's only the soft stone got washed away and the hard stone got left. But then you can walk up to a lot of these things and rub it with your hand, and it just falls, it just rubs off. So it's not the hard stone. It's the story they give it about geology is just, it's just
Yeah, so you got your black, and then you got your red, and it's running down, and it just appears out of nowhere. It's coming out of the side of the mountain and then going down, just like the black is. Just like blood that would be seeping, or you know, I mean, look at this. So this to me is just petrified venous blood because of its color.
Yeah.
And then there's smaller and smaller channels, which is exactly what you expect to find with the blood vessels.
Indeed.
This is looking in the breathing portion of an elephant's skull. Right. This is all collapsed on the mountain if it was ever there to begin with, if it was an elephant. And then you'll see as I come around the side, this is a fissure here for the optic nerve. That's a very specific place for a big, large crack, right? Where do you see inside because this is where the eyeball is, and this is where the chewing muscle attaches. And the masseter is here. And then going down is back into that channel right there. So, and you can see how it kind of wears away. This gets into the bone structure, which we didn't even touch on today. Because the histology of this, if you start to look at this under a microscope, what would you expect to see? And you would see what's known as cortical and trabecular bone. It looks like Swiss cheese. It's fractal, and it goes down ever and ever smaller. And in our bones is where the red blood is produced in the body. You have stem cells in there, in the long bones, in the arms, in the legs, the pelvis, the spine, and the skull. That is where all the red blood is being produced in the body. And it's in the central portion. It's like a fractal Swiss cheese environment filled with this reddish blood. And then if you go out toward the outer edges of the bone where it's smooth, this is called cortical bone. And that grows like rings of a tree, is very solid, and only has the occasional holes going through it for the blood vessels like you see there. It's very small, but you get the idea. That's where the tusk would have come out. If Montgo had a tusk, there's a couple of spots where it could have been, but I found no traces of anything that would look like a tusk to me. Oh no, shoot.
You've lost it again.
Dang it.
What we got here?
Yeah, it's going pretty good despite technical difficulties, I guess. So looking at the eyeball, this is what I was going to show you here. So I showed this picture. Come on, work. Yes, it worked. Yay. Okay. And if you look at this line, if you look at this line here, that is the exact same portion of the cave. Look at that. It even jogs up right there where that one does.
Yeah, that one does. Yeah.
Like how what are the odds? Right? It's a little astonishing when you see it.
Yeah.
Like that. And there is that fissure that I showed you in the exact same location. And right here in other videos I've shown see it? Yeah, so it's a whole heck of a lot of coincidences lining up. So the question is it pareidolia, or is this an emerging pattern? You see the smaller? You've got the smooth face, and then there's a big channel going in. And if I get closer to that channel, I'll show you what that looks like right here. This is on the side of the mountain tonight. Walk and talk. Here's a beautiful example of this. So massive hunks of this kind of stone are found. Come on, you can do it. My computer is not liking. It's not even letting me play video now. It was doing that before. Anyway, normally I'm a little more organized, but without being able to access my picture files and all of this stuff cutting out on me, I'm not able to
worries.
as well.
We've done well. We're over 2 hours already, so that's kind of cool. I'm just looking at the questions.
That's about what you said you wanted to do anyway. So I can start sharing. We can take some questions if.
Has anyone got any questions in the chat that you would like to ask Mike? I'm just having a bit of a look. Is that 7?
So I started to say we're not taught that the heart has, or that stones might have an orientation, an up and a front and a back and a bottom, right? And if we knew that, we would all just naturally start to see things in our environment. People are always asking me, well, what about kidneys and what about livers? And, you know, I've got those as well, right? If I wet this rock, it just comes alive as far as the, the material. And by the way, I got a 1000x microscope as well. And a couple of the live streams, I went in and looked at some of these rocks. And I also looked at some of the rocks from the mountain. You know, is that just a random rock that looks fleshy, or was that once a kidney? Normally kidneys have an indentation here. And then if you look at kidneys in the tissues, they have these, what's known as the medullae, which I've shown in some of the rocks as well. So there's an indentation, and that's where the blood vessels go. But it's not very specific. So if I hold up a kidney-shaped rock and I tell people, this was once a kidney, you know, they're going to look at me like I've been smoking something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I focus so much. Here's one I haven't shown. So much on the heart stones, right? Because these are the easiest to spot. They're the most repeatable, and they show the most specific variations. So it's it's something that anybody can do. You don't have to have been a chiropractor. Like, there's the indentation at the top. You know, how many times? So anyway, I sent these rocks off to this laboratory, and they said some stuff about what they were going to do. And then they sent me back their opinions, and I made a video about that. And the thing is, that video, it's a 3-hour video. And the reason it's 3 hours is because there were 2 telephone conversations that were both recorded. So a person reached out to me, somebody that reached out to me by email and was interested in the research, was an amateur geologist, interested in geology his whole life, and was turned on to my videos by somebody who had seen a number of them, was really excited, and she introduced him to the subject, and he's like, wow, I've never heard of anything like this, and he thought it was interesting enough to reach out to me. So he asked me if I'd be willing to send some to a laboratory. And in like the previous video I'd done, or 2 videos before that, I specifically said, hey, if anyone knows anybody that has access to a laboratory, by all means reach out to me, because I'd love to, get some more information about these stones. That was before I got the microscope as well. So now I've done some of this. Like I said, I had them CAT scanned, and there you see that this knife shape. You can see that one's been broken. As soon as there's any kind of a fracture, it immediately it changes its look dramatically. You see these red lines, right? That are also right where the sutures would be.
Yeah.
What are the odds? So anyway, what I got back was essentially opinions and no data. It takes a long time to go through it, and it's very interesting, and it's a very good example of some grassroots researcher who doesn't have an academic background in geology or chemistry or any of these things, who's noticed something that might have some truth to it, and what happens when a person like that, who's doing his best to apply the scientific method, brushes up against academia, or you could say mainstream geology thinking.
Exactly.
And how did that go down? What was the communication? I have all of the audio conversations. The whole video plays the audio conversations. Anything that we're discussing, there's visuals for what's being discussed as we're talking about it, what they're claiming about the stones after the fact, and my opinion about that, and any evidence that I have to refute their claims. So that's why this thing took 3 hours.
Wow.
And if you want to,
so that's on your channel as well.
My friend Alex, who thinks I talk way too much, and maybe some of the people in the chat do too, he said that it didn't feel like 3 hours at all. It felt a lot shorter. So that was quite a compliment from him. So
cool. Yeah. Well, there's definitely lots of good content. So yeah, guys, link below for Stellium7 channel. Go and check it out. A couple of people said, why are the organs outside the body?
Yes. Did I even finish answering that? Just the final thing. Getting hit with what? Archaics said flash freezing. Flash freezing is interesting because if you think of water, water expands when it's frozen, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a
Blow
cellular
it
structure
apart.
and cellular walls,
break it down.
boom, you know,
Yep.
and then that would also allow for the infiltration of the waters of the deep, right? People have seen these videos of the submarine bouncing off of the lake at the bottom of the ocean. You know, so maybe the waters of the deep are high mineral content, like Mother Shipton's Cave or Lake Natron or something like that, which we know can cause crystallization. There are examples of petrified organs in the fossil record. There are people like Girolamo Sagato and another guy, I think his name was Bruni, who lived in Italy, and in the 1800s they were petrifying all kinds of flesh. Paul Cook and others. Paul, Black Sheep researcher. What the Flock TV just did one on the statues. Like, is it possible these were actually petrified beings? You know, so you know, take everything with a grain of salt and decide what you like and what you don't like. But I think the answer is closer to E, all of the above, and that there's overlaps with all of these subjects, and people get snowed in on their pet theory. And are they're totally narrow-minded, and they start calling the other people shills and shouting out at them, and everything's of this, everything's of that. It's like, come on, like haven't you come far enough to realize that you got a selective sift? Use a bit of syncretism where you're finding out where the overlaps are. And that's where the mythology is interesting, and where, it's not just, it looks like a mountain, it's like there's actual, mythological record for these kinds of things. Yeah. So it's this is just the tip of the iceberg. Iceberg, really. And it's been a lot of fun, but I never envisioned myself doing anything like this. And it's kind of gone a bit kicking and streaming into it because I knew, the more this kind of theory attracts attention, the more fire it's gonna get. And so I'm no expert. Don't take my word for it. Go out and examine things for yourself and see what you find. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And just because I can't explain the how and why of this stuff, and I don't know exactly what it was. Oh, I talked about archaics. It could be plasma apocalypse. It could be freezing. It could be heat. It could be electricity. It could be all of the above. There might be many different manifestations of all these things, depending on what tissue we're looking at, what size creature it was. Let me just finish with one crazy thing. So I showed this one, before that, that's the most specific one I ever found. What are the odds that the most specific one I ever found would lead to this whole discovery, but it's still the most detailed one I ever found? How's that for a request being answered from the universe, right? Let me just show one last one here now that everyone's been prepped.
I'll just read. I found my Sherlock Holmes quote. Sherlock Holmes observed that once you have eliminated the impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be.
Someday I won't be able to show this because I'll be too weak to lift it, but for now I can.
Whale heart.
I don't know, man, but it's big.
Oh my God.
So there's your isthmus going into chambers, right? So based on what I've shown already, you would expect what? Flattened top, and then at the above on the slightly downhill side of the top, you'd expect there to be some kind of an opening for the aorta, right?
Yeah.
Well,
indented at the back. There we go. Yeah.
There it is, and it's even opening into a chamber.
Oh, you can see straight through it.
Yeah, and you see the curved line there going. It's hard for me to show, but it's going down, curving where this hand is. Sorry.
Yeah. Underneath
that curved line. Yeah. There's your sulcus line. This. How big was that creature?
Big, right? Big.
So yeah.
So there anyway. We go. All righty. So thanks everyone in chat. Hippie Shake doing an amazing job as always. Stuart Cat 14. Stuart says it'll be hard.
Yeah.
So
somebody says I've never heard Stellium talk over people. I had a much more organized idea for a presentation, but when I can't even load pictures. It's just bizarre. So sorry.
Yeah. That we had a few issues, as we do, right? When we try and get this stuff out. Shane's never having sex again. That's okay. Thanks for that information.
Does that have to do with me talking too much?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm traumatized.
But the thing is about all this, like we said from the start, I mean,
Hey, Annette.
All new theories sound strange when you hear them because they're new, right? It's like when you go and do a new thing, it's hard. When you go to the gym and try a new exercise, it's hard, it's different. But then if you just dismiss it because of that reason, then you're just going to be in the same place in 20 years and still complaining. This is all about, a lot of theories have no basis, but you've got to look in, do theories have a basis? What are they based on? And check it out. And most of all, guys, don't believe or disbelieve things just on what the popular opinion is. Trust yourself a bit. Go in and understand that the collective is kind of silly, and you're much smarter on your own rather than joining the collective. So that's what this is really all about, isn't it? Being autodidactic, of course. Be self-educated, because if you're not, the only choice we'll have left is to believe what they tell us, right? And as we know, a lot of that is just crap.
That kind of thing can kill you nowadays.
That kind of stuff will kill you. Definitely kill your brain. So there we go. All right. Oh, Brian said Magic Treehouse is on. So if you're bored, guys, Magic Treehouse is on at the moment. I'll be back next week. We're having a chat with, I've forgotten her name, but it's all about Yggdrasil and elves and Nordic stuff and all that kind of good stuff.
Big trees. I just want to give a shout out to Hangman1128. That channel is showing, I started to say before, the tree stumps. He's got the best boots on the ground footage for not the stumps, but for like trees that had 10-mile wide stumps that are.
Is that when he goes up the mountain and he's pulling bits off? Yeah.
Here's a little piece from a decomposing tree, and then he holds it up, and there's like a 50-yard version of the exact same thing.
Yeah, and he's like,
he goes up and he shows all the different stages of petrification. He can you can see that it's still wood here, but it's stone there. And so you see the stages of. He also shows all the different ways that sap can manifest, because sap becomes marble, becomes quartz crystal. It depends on the composition of the sap, which kind of tree. He's not so methodical as far as looking at it from a scientific method sort of a perspective, because he's coming at it from a very biblical perspective. For him, he doesn't need to prove it. It's self-evident. And I believe his findings are self-evident. They dovetail perfectly with mine. And none of the stuff that I found here in this region matches what he's finding. So our stuff isn't conflicting. I'm like, yes, and right? Not no.
I mean, if you had titanic beings, we needed titanic food, right? Which is titanic vegetation, trees, plants.
Yeah, and that gets into what are geodes and what are all these. Like if you look at crystals and minerals, right? Crystals and minerals, they are so incredibly interesting, and agates, and they all look like tissues of different types. Isn't that amazing? So I think that when we're talking about kidney stones and gallstones and all, and all of these different things, that maybe what we're looking at are the remains of all these different pieces of biology. Next time, if you want me back after this, next time I can. I'll have my pictures ready to go, and we can go through lots of different examples of stuff I'm talking about.
That sounds awesome. All righty. So, we've almost gone to 2:30, 2.5 hours. So thank you, everyone, for being with us and staying the whole time if you have. Like I said, the link for Mike's channel is below, so make sure you do go across, check it out, share the work around, guys. Let's get it out there. And more than, it's important. Stay awesome and have an amazing night, day, afternoon, wherever you are on the realm. And we'll see you on the next upload. All right, guys. Bye for now. See ya.
Ciao.